There's something in the American cultural water that we swim in that no matter how much we do, how much effort we put forward, we never seem to have enough. We never do enough. We never are enough. I'm starting a new series this morning called Never Enough. We're going to build on the series we just finished called The American Way. We're going to do this for the rest of the year. So this is going to be a 15-week process. It's going to come at you in 3 5-week blocks. So the first week of each block, what we're going to do is we're going to try to put our finger on, we're going to name a cultural force. Just something in kind of the American cultural world that we live in that has the tendency to shape us in ways that are inconsistent with the Jesus way. Then we're going to spend 3 weeks talking about historic Christian practices to help combat that force. And then we'll spend a week sort of wrapping up the block before we move on to the next one. So the force that we're going to name this morning is progress. Progress. And by progress, I don't mean steady movement toward a specific destination. That, as we're going to see in a minute, is part of the problem. When I say progress, the way I'm defining it is the way most of us experience it in our just everyday life. And it's the sort of aimless pursuit of what we perceive to be the improvement of our condition. It's usually measured by more. More money, more time, more stuff, more experience, just more. And ironically, it leaves a lot of us feeling less than. And it's not the Jesus way. I mean, I hope I don't have to tell you. I don't know how well you all know Jesus. I hope I don't have to tell you that Jesus doesn't want anybody feeling like that. Jesus does not want anybody getting up in the morning and feeling like they carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. Or that no matter what they do, they're never enough. And I know that a lot of you feel that way. I know there are times I feel that way. That I carry the weight of the world on my shoulders, or that no matter what I do, it's never enough. And I'm not arguing that progress is entirely to blame, but it's certainly a variable. It's an ingredient. That our sort of uncritical commitment to the aimless improving of our condition, or what we perceive to be the improving of our condition, it does something to us. And so if we're going to deal seriously with the Jesus way, then we've got to talk about this thing we call progress. And we're going to do that. Our text this morning comes from Luke's Gospel, chapter 10. I'm sure this is a very familiar story to many of you. As Jesus and the disciples continued on their way to Jerusalem, they came to a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he taught, but Martha was distracted by the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, "Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I do all the work? Tell her to come and help me." But the Lord said to her, "My dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. There is only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her." So Jesus and his disciples, they've been in the northern province of Galilee. This is getting toward the end of Jesus' ministry. He decides to set out for the city of Jerusalem. So he travels south from Galilee in the northern region of Israel. He probably follows this ancient Roman road that runs parallel to the Jordan River, all the way down here to, here's Jerusalem, his destination. You can see Bethany is this little suburb of Jerusalem. It's a village about a mile outside the city. And as he's traveling through Bethany, they're going to stop before they enter into Jerusalem. And a woman named Martha, a homeowner in town, invites Jesus to come inside. And that was a normal practice in Jewish culture. Hospitality is a big part of Jewish culture, as it ought to be a big part of Christian culture. And so Martha invites Jesus into her home. And we don't know if it's just for a meal, if it's for an overnight stay. Those were all normal things in Jewish culture. So Jesus enters her home. We're told that Martha busies herself preparing a meal. Again, that was a normal expression of Jewish culture. You invite your guests in, you're going to give them a meal. So Martha goes and starts preparing a meal. Jesus, the committed rabbi, Luke doesn't tell us this, but we probably ought to assume that his disciples were invited in as well. So while the meal's being prepared, Jesus sits down to teach his disciples, and Martha's sister Mary decides to audit the class. So she sits in listening to what Jesus is telling his disciples. Martha is described as being distracted. So this is the author tipping his interpretive hand pretty quickly. He's using this scene to draw a contrast. Mary is sitting and listening to Jesus, but Martha is distracted. We all know what that means. The word distracted means unable to give your full attention to something because you're preoccupied with something else. So what Luke is telling you right out of the gate is sitting and listening to Jesus is obviously the thing that you ought to be giving your full time and attention to, but you can't because you're preoccupied with something else. But what Martha is preoccupied with is a perfectly fine thing. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a good part of Jewish hospitable culture. But it is a cultural expectation. You invite people into your home, you're going to feed them. And you're going to feed them, you got to make a meal. And that requires work. So things do have to get done. And if you had asked Martha, she would have described it as a good thing. There's nothing wrong with it. I invited people into my home. I want to serve them. I want them to have a nice time. I want to be hospitable. I want to show the love of God. However she would have described that. All of the work required to prepare the meal to serve the guests is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But unbeknownst to her, and this is exactly how cultural forces work, unbeknownst to her, something that she just uncritically accepted the need to do, which was not in itself evil or wrong, in fact, it was a good thing, became a distraction keeping her for something that was more important or even better. The cultural expectation to prepare a meal for Jesus and his disciples became a distraction from actually sitting and listening to anything that he was saying. And I wonder if our uncritical commitment to this thing that I'm calling progress functions in a similar way. So if you're new here and you plan on coming back consistently, you'll get used to this. So this is a technique of mine all the time. You ask yourself, how consistently and seriously do you sit and listen to Jesus? How consistently and seriously do you sit and listen to Jesus? Now, if the answer is, well, gosh, Mike, not very much. Thanks for making me feel bad about myself, but I don't do that very much. Okay, ask yourself why. Why not? Now, some of you're here because, there was a baby dedication. You didn't really want to be here, but hey, we're dedicating kids, so you come to church. Whatever, that's fine. Some of you are like, because I don't care. I don't sit and listen to Jesus because at the end of the day, I don't care. That's fine. I don't really have much to offer you if that's where you are, other than to say, if you ever find yourself feeling like the people in those videos, Jesus does not want you to feel that way. And I can tell you just have to take my word for it, from personal experience, Jesus has things to tell you that if you were to listen to them and take them seriously, you wouldn't. Or at least you wouldn't feel this way as much as you do. So you might want to listen. Now, for those of you who you wouldn't say you don't care, but you would acknowledge, yeah, Mike, I don't really sit and listen to Jesus very consistently or very seriously, if I'm being honest. And I asked you why, I'm guessing the answer will sound something like, because I got stuff to do. I got to get my kids to school and soccer and piano, and I gotta mow the grass, and I gotta get work done around the house, and I gotta stay at work a few extra hours because we're trying to grow the business, and I gotta get the shopping done. I got stuff I gotta do. So I don't have time to consistently sit and seriously listen to what Jesus says. I got stuff to do. See, in the same way that Martha was operating under this sort of cultural assumption that she had to go do such and such a thing, and it kept her from something that Jesus says is more important. Literally the only thing worth being concerned about. How many concerns do you have? I got a few. And if I were sitting here right now talking to Jesus face to face, Jesus would look at me and say, Mike, there's only one thing you need to be concerned about. And I would say, well, that's very impractical, Jesus, that, to the point of sounding delusional, right? But Martha's distracted, and I think a lot of us are distracted. Because every day we're getting up and we're going about our business. We got stuff we got to do. And in the same way that you can tell from Martha's response to her sister, that just sort of uncritically diving into the cultural expectation of preparing a meal wasn't doing a whole lot for her soul. She's sort of snappy. Our uncritical commitment to progress doesn't do much for ours either. And it's evidenced by the testimonies from the video that you probably go, yeah, I feel that way. I do that. I snap at my kids like that too. If you're going to deal seriously with this concept of progress, one of the things that you need to be honest about, is I like being distracted. I like being distracted. Especially when the distraction comes in the form of work, getting something done, something I can check off a list or something I can look at and I did that. If it has to do with achievement or performance, I like being distracted. Because if you're like me, work and achievement and performance, it's a lot of how we identify. It's how we establish a sense of self, purpose, meaning, value. What's the first question you ask somebody when you meet them for the first time? What do you do? Not, what are you interested in? What are your favorite hobbies? What gets you excited? I bumped into somebody I hadn't seen in a while. This was a couple weeks ago. And he said, tell me a great story. And I was totally caught off guard. I'm a storyteller. It's what I do. But in that setting, it's you're so used to somebody just going, so what do you do? It's you're the graduation party. You're prepared with your, your answers. He says, tell me a great story. I don't have a great, What do you do? It's why a lot of us, we have a hard time being still. If you've ever tried, try it. We're going to talk about it in the next few weeks. Try being still. Try getting up and sitting in a chair and putting your feet flat on the floor and your hands on your knees with no noise, no sound, and sit there. Put yourself in time out. Sit there. You think, try it. I'm telling you, try it. See what happens to you. We have a hard time being still. We have a hard time not doing stuff, getting stuff done. If aliens were to land on our planet and observe us for a period of time, they would be surprised to hear that we call ourselves human beings. They would expect us to say we're human doings. Because this is how we operate. We like to be distracted. Being distracted, especially when it comes to work, it fills us with a sense of who we are. If you're being honest, one of the reasons that you like to be distracted is, and I don't know what the cause or the effect is here, but one of the reasons we like to be distracted is because we're not sure who we are apart from what we're able to accomplish. And you don't want to step into that very scary space of where you're not adding any value to anything, because in that space, you're no longer sure who you are, ontologically, to use a fancy word, in your essence. Who are you if you're no longer the person who can do this job or play that sport or, who are you now? And because we like being distracted, we like other people to be distracted with us. And I don't know that it's more than just misery loves company. Martha gets upset that Mary's not helping with the preparations. It's more than misery loves company. It's the way that we measure our value. Because I measure my value by what I'm able to get done and what I'm able to produce. And that is inherently becomes a competitive thing. And this may never rise to the level of like conscious awareness, but somewhere deep inside my psyche, I tell myself, I am more valuable than you because of what I'm able to do that you can't do. So I don't have any space in my brain for people who don't play the game. Were you ever a kid and like you wanted to play a game or something and like your friend was like, "No, it's stupid, I'm not playing that." It's like, no, like you have to play my game. If you don't play, then how am I going to know whether I'm any good, right? We want other people to be distracted with us. That way we can all collude with one another in a very unhealthy way of living life. That it's all about what we have and how much we can get done and what we can accomplish and our resumes and, all that stuff. And this all happens, in a subtle, unspoken way. And to sort of add insult to injury, because we're kind of uncritical about it, and we don't often step back and like make this an object of scrutiny, what we do is we just uncritically drag Jesus into it. So we're just committed to progress that we're not even thinking about, and we just pull Jesus into the mess. Like Martha, think about this for a minute. Martha walks into a room where Jesus is teaching people. And she looks at Jesus and she says, "Jesus, tell my sister to stop listening to you and come help me." Think about how insane that is. So I get nervous about it. I wonder how often we do this as a church. Our church in particular is my primary concern, but just the church in general. How often does the church, with its concern for growth and reaching more people and, getting to the next town, getting to the next country, get to that, with all of our concern with growth and reaching people and all that, do we implicitly tell people essentially or influence people to stop listening to Jesus? Let's not actually make it the mainstay of church life to sit and listen to what Jesus is actually saying. Let's just assume we already know, and let's get on with the work. Now listen, there is not an organization on the planet that ought to care more about growth and reaching more people than the church. If a company, if a business can get like super excited about like selling widgets, that it like pours countless man hours and just countless dollars into making sure that everybody on the planet owns this widget, then the church ought to be able to get excited about every person on the planet hearing about Jesus. But in the same way that a global enterprise can spend tons and tons of money and exhaust its people on advertising and shiny packaging and strategy sessions and whatever, and none of that will make any difference if the product they're actually trying to sell is no good. The church can literally exhaust people trying to get to the next person, the next town, the next country, the next whatever, always going. Let's get bigger, let's grow, more people, blah, blah, blah. When the primary product we're selling, which is you, so you think the product we're selling is Jesus. The product we're selling is not Jesus. You are the product. The product that goes out into the world is a changed life. And if the product is no good, why would anyone want to come in? To use the videos, if you were talking to somebody who claimed to know Jesus Christ, and they were every bit as anxious, bitter, frustrated, tired, restless, aimless, exhausted, angry as you are if you don't know Jesus. And they said, you should really know Jesus. If there is no fundamental difference between people who call themselves Christ followers and people who don't, we can go anywhere we want and we can shout Jesus from the rooftops. It doesn't matter. And things do need to get done. I can hear some of you saying, well, Mike, I can't just, I'm not you. I don't get paid to just pray all day. Okay, I got to get stuff done. Trust me, I've heard it, okay? I got to get stuff done. I get it. Okay, you got to get stuff done. You got to take your kids and stuff, and you got to clean your house, and you got to do all the stuff. I get it. All the more reason why you need to sit and listen to Jesus. Because I'm going to tell you, all the stuff that you think you got to get done, you don't have to get done as much stuff as you think you do. And you know that because you've been in scenarios where by God's grace, you've had a moment of clarity, right? I love it in the story. Jesus says that Martha's worried and distracted by many things. Literally, in the Greek, it's the things. Have you ever been in a place where you've got a running list in your head of just all the stuff that you got to get done? It literally shows up in your brain as the things. If I was what are you worried about? The things. All the things. What exactly? All this stuff that's got to get done. And then by God's grace, you get a moment of clarity and you step back and you realize, oh, yeah, no, none of that stuff actually has to get done. Actually, none of it at all. I mean, I have to put up with it not getting done, but none of it has to get done. I can literally sit here and do absolutely nothing. She's distracted by the things. One of the reasons you need to sit and listen to Jesus is because all the things that you think need to get done, a lot of that stuff doesn't need to get done. You actually need Jesus to become a value center for you. Here's an aimless commitment to progress. It can tell you that things must be done. It's often lying to you, that things must be done, or that things can be done. But what progress cannot do is give you any sort of helpful rubric as to whether something should be done. That's a value decision. And you and I need someone in our lives to become a value center for us, to be able to tell us what we should or should not do. If Martha had just slowed down for 1 minute, and if she had looked at Jesus and said, Jesus, normal operating procedure here is that I would go and I would make a meal for you all. Would that be the best thing for me to do right now, or would the best thing for me to do would sit and listen to you? What do you think? Now, I don't know how Jesus would have answered that question. He might have said, Martha, it's perfectly fine to go make a meal, just don't be angry about it. He might also have said, you know what, we can eat later. I'm going to teach for a little. Why don't you sit down and let me tell you something? And then, heck, we'll make the meal together. I don't know what he would have said, but it would have been worth the question. See, we don't often know what we should or shouldn't do. We're just sort of being carried along. And this is where progress is not inherently evil. Let's be honest. Our notion of progress has done some really good things. It's improved living conditions for people all over the world. It has done wonders for global poverty, medical advancements, life expectancy. I mean, progress is not inherently evil. It is always evil if toward an evil end, and it is dangerous if toward no known end. Always evil if toward an evil end, dangerous if toward an unknown end. See, the word progress assumes you're going somewhere and that you know where you're going, right? I can't say that I'm progressing toward that microphone over there unless I know that that's where I'm going. Progress assumes a destination. And for most of us in general culture, we have absolutely no idea where we're going, but we assume we're heading in the right direction. Progress for the Christian person is very specific. The destination that we have in mind is a cruciform life, Christ-likeness. It's to be conformed in the image of Jesus Christ. That's our destination. That's where we're going. Twice in his letter to the church in Rome, the Apostle Paul uses the word conform. In chapter 8, he says that we are to be conformed into the image of Christ. It's a word that means to share the likeness of. But the idea here is that by apprenticing yourself to Jesus, by sitting and listening to Jesus, over time, you're going to become more like him. And that's the goal. But to be conformed, you have to be transformed. Transform means to change shape or to change image. What Paul says is, don't be conformed. Don't share the likeness of the world with its uncritical commitment to progress. But instead, sit and listen to Jesus. Let him change the way you think. And by changing the way you think about things, your shape will change. You'll go from being people who are angry, tired, bitter, restless, never feeling like you're enough, never feeling like you have enough, can't sit still, always feel like you got to be on the move, you might actually become people who are full of peace and joy. People who know how to laugh and live life as a gift, not a game. But you got to sit and listen to Jesus. The world is preoccupied. It's just like Martha. The world is preoccupied with a lot of things, many things. And it's anxious, and it's restless, and it's frustrated. But Jesus would say there's just one thing that you need to be concerned about. And that's listening, sitting and listening to him. What are the things that you hear when you sit and listen to Jesus? You're never going to hear Jesus say, you're enough. You will hear him say, I'm enough. You will never hear Jesus say, you just need to believe in yourself. You'll hear him say things, you just need to believe in me. You will never hear Jesus say, you can do it. You'll hear him say things like, I've already done it. You won't hear Jesus say things like, you can do whatever you want as long as you dream. You'll hear him say things like, nothing is possible apart from me. So when you come to Christ, you're not going to hear him say anything that puts the weight or the pressure back on you so that it crushes you. He is going to put a weight on you, but he calls it light and easy. It's just the weight of followership. He says, look, you just trust me and sit and listen to me and follow me. If you just concern yourself with that and not all the other stuff, life will go a lot better for you. And I don't mean there's any hardships or struggles or whatever. I mean your qualitative experience as a human being changes. Less human doing, more human being. Right? Less what can I get done and more just who you. Hey, Mike, who are you? I'm a child. I'm a child of God. That's the answer. I'm a child. I'm a kid. And you can rest in that. You can rest in that. Regardless of what you're able to accomplish, you can rest in that. So while the world's concerned about many things, you and I, if we claim to be followers of Christ, should be concerned with one thing and one thing only, and that's sitting and listening to Jesus. So one question for you to take with you is to ask yourself, if you're distracted, do you feel like you're distracted? Do you feel like you're having a hard time giving your full attention and energy to sitting and listening to Jesus because you're preoccupied with something else? If so, what's the something else right now? What's got you so preoccupied? What's got you so busy, worried and upset about other things? You rest in Christ.